Well, we have a quorum. We'll go ahead and start the meeting. This is a call to order of the Representative Town Meeting Rules Committee on April 1. And first item is approval of the minutes of February 11. If I could have a motion.
And for the
Quickly, somebody second.
No. I have some good things to say this time.
Oh, lovely.
Oh my God.
I was going to say Mark's not here and he's missing an opportunity when I would say he did a nice job in these notes in spite of misspelling my name 6 times in a previous month. I'm not vindictive at all. I thought he did a nice job in notes unless anybody found something different.
So we got an A.
He did very well.
Good.
Lovely. Yes.
I have been informed by a member of my committee that Robert's Rules of Order has changed so that you can still vote on minutes even if you were not at the meeting.
That sounds dumb.
The reason is that you're voting on the velocity that good minutes were taken, not necessarily on what transpired. I'm just pointing that out.
Hot news.
Yeah.
Do we care?
With all due respect to all of those people who, I will check that out.
I was going to say, did you check it out?
No.
I will check on that.
I had Barbara's opinion. I don't care.
All right.
Do we get a second?
Yes, we have a second from Lois.
Was I at that?
All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous abstentions?
No, I'm in favor.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Just items to discuss. We have the police union contract, which has now been approved, and I will do my part to make sure we get docs. I thought we had the docs, but maybe they're still working on them. But I couldn't agree with you more. It's a frustration we've had for years. So we'll get that done.
Of the contract, please.
So let's assign responsibilities here, committees. Primary PH&S, F&B secondary. Any others?
I second that,
Okay.
providing somebody else other than the chairman made
Which
that.
second? What committee did you say second?
Finance and Budget Committee, yeah.
Seth, we're happy to look at it, but it's really more of a numbers thing. I mean, I don't know why we're
You
primary.
guys are still primary.
I mean, we'll just.
We
What are we gonna
have
do?
been through this.
You're just going to
Yeah,
I mean, are we going to
No,
rubber
we have
stamp
had
it?
this debate, but maybe
Yeah.
you weren't. But the idea is that if there's a committee that is health and safety or park and rec, they lead, and then even if there are numbers, then F&B is
Yeah,
secondary.
'cause I mean, we really won't question the numbers. So.
No,
No, but you can speak on all the changes, like on shifts or other things like that, so we don't have to.
Okay.
Is this for the
so
is this for the April meeting we're supposed to do?
yes,
Okay.
to be for this is, and when we set the agenda, that will be the sum and substance, I'm afraid, of the April meeting. We'll do that next, but great. So we've got the assignments. Motion for those assignments, please. A second. Okay, second. All right. All in favor? All opposed? Abstentions? Don't see any. Unanimous. Where there's a need with Liz Bacon's resignation to have the RTM propose a new member for the Blight Committee. It's not our approval. We would just send them forward. It's the Board of Selectmen who actually put the person on the board. But I did send out an email today to all the heads of the districts and just ask them to poll their members and see if we can't have some people who are willing to serve. We need
I think
one.
that's a
Yeah,
good idea.
yeah.
If I recall, there were 2 candidates that expressed interest when this first started, I believe Ann Reed may have been the other. Just if my recollection serves me correct. But rather than districts, if we send it out, just an email to the RTM itself saying if you're interested, please contact you.
Yeah,
That
I already
That's
sent
what I
the,
figured.
I already sent the note out to the,
Did you say that?
I sent a note out to the district chairs to give them the chance to get around and kind of sell the deal. But I'll do it also.
Just do it to the RTM,
Yeah, sure.
because then we can have it done in
Yep.
that meeting.
Yeah. So that's rolling. Plastic bags. We have here tonight a distinguished guest, Mona McNally, who is working diligently on this, along with two other distinguished individuals, Frank Emp and Mac Patrick.
The three amigos.
Here we go. What's the latest, Monica? We're breathless.
You're breathless? Okay, that's great. So I have a little report for you, bring you up to date on where we are. I'm going to ask that you would just listen through the report before you ask any questions, because maybe I will answer your questions somewhere in there.
Is this a written report that I could attach, or should I take notes?
No, it's too much.
Okay.
You know what? I'll send it to you,
Okay.
because this has like some of my own scribbles on it.
Thank you.
So what I'm going to do is give you an up-to-date on where we are, and then Frank is going to give you an update on where the state is versus our ordinance versus New York, which just passed last week, a statewide ban. So they are the second state after California to have a state ban, but he'll tell you all about that. Okay, so if you remember correctly, we have the 3 committees. That's 40 people that are working on this. We have, after being asked by Rules and by the Board of Selectmen to look into this, we have been soliciting the town people's opinion. And we've done this, we're looking for business opinions and individual opinions. As you remember, we had a town hearing on February 6th. We had about 110 people attend. We had 30 people speak. We had 25 in favor, 4 not in favor, and 1 ambivalent. We had a second public hearing on March 27th. We had approximately 69 in attendance. We had 20 people speak. We had 19 people in favor of the ordinance. We had 1 person not in favor. A big discussion point right now is the 10 cents charge on the paper bag. If you remember correctly, there's 2 points to this. There's the banning the single-use plastic bags, and then there's imposing a 10 cents charge on the paper bag. That's become a hot topic. We had, of the 20 people speak, we had 13 people speak in favor of that, and that has been a topic that's been in the newspaper lately, so I'm sure that some of that publicity generated those responses. We had 6 people that did not mention it, so it could be assumed that they are in favor of the 10 cents or not. Depends on how you want to read that. We have visited local businesses. I don't think I think that happened after the last rules meeting. We visited 13 businesses in all. Jamie Stevenson, our selectman, and I visited 7, and we had in-depth interviews with these businesses. As you know, as you don't know, but our committees, the 3 committees, also reached out to the town committees, town commissions, and also our friends and neighbors to get input. We have been in the paper at least 14 times. There were 2 articles last week. We did have 1 letter by the editor on March 21st. Again, thank you, Darien Times, for this coverage. It's been very thorough, and we really appreciate bringing this to the town's, the forefront of people's information feed. We've had several meetings, and Frank and I did update the Board of Selectmen last week, I think on the 25th. So tonight, we are hoping to do a couple of things. One is answer any of your questions, and this is really some of the questions you asked before I will answer now. And we're also trying to get all of your questions out in front so that we know that we will not be on the May meeting, but we would like to have all of your questions answered for the May Rules meeting, so that when we come before you on May 20th for the RTM June 10th meeting, we have all our ducks in order. So some of the questions that have been asked. There's been, I'm sure you've seen, well, maybe you haven't seen, I've become a recycled information font. But you might have seen, because this is pretty interesting, that you know that we've been recycling in Darien and that we've been paid. We have been paid as much as $15 a ton for our recyclables. I'm happy to tell you that even though there are other towns that are not in the position that we are in and will soon be paying to have their recycles taken, we are until June 30th of 2024 good at $7.50 a ton for our recycles. So this is very good news. And this is unless the contract is amended. This is per Darren at Public Works. On the tax questions, I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but we did have a question on, so there's the 10 cents. So is the 10 cents a taxable event? So two components. So for the sidewalk sales, the 10 cents would not be an issue because it's per item, and the 10 cents would never be part of the item, so it would never kick into a taxable event. Does that make sense? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so for the sidewalk sales, you get a $100 tax-free item, any item. So you could buy $1,000 worth of stuff. If every item is $100 or less, you don't pay any Connecticut tax for that 2 weeks in, I think it's August. Okay, so let's say that you paid $100 and you had the 10 cents bag charge. So now it's $100.10. Would that trigger the event? No, it wouldn't. It's per item. Does that make sense? Okay. The other question is, this is pretty tricky, but it's, okay, so let's say you spend tons of money on paper bags for some reason. You just buy a whole bunch of stuff and you have $100 worth of paper bags. Are you taxed on that $100? I don't know. I did just speak with Wayne minutes ago, actually, and he has been reaching out to the IRS, the Connecticut IRS, and we don't have an answer. He's going to now try to have Terry Wood help us out. So that answer I will have. Of course, this isn't. This is a kind of an FYI, I think, topic. Volunteers. So the enforcement of this ordinance, at this point, the goal is to have a volunteer be the enforcer. And we do not, as a town, pay for travel, and Kate has told me that there will not be an increase in liability costs. There will be, of course, for any person that does this job, there will be postage and paper and that kind of thing. And if our town council needs to be asked any questions, of course, there'll be legal advice fees there. I was asked about liability. Mike, you asked me this about liability and if there is a lawsuit, and I'm sorry, I didn't go to law school, so I don't have the answer to that, and I don't think anybody has the answer to that.
Yes. I'll tell you, the answer is yes.
Okay, but I dollar-wise, I don't. Oh, of course, there's liability, but I don't know what the amount is. Just one second.
Okay.
Let me just finish. So what we've done with all of this is to really try to. I'm going to hand out the ordinance. This is yellow to try to keep people that came to the hearing able to see the differences. We really try to be flexible to the town businesses, and by doing that, one big thing that we changed in this ordinance version is that stores that are under 10,000 square feet will not be required to charge the 10 cents. This is something that we heard when we visited the stores, and I think is a very positive thing for them. They obviously can charge the 10 cents if they want to, but they don't have to if they don't have to. And these aren't the entities that generate a lot of the bag usage. So I think this is a good compromise, and has been viewed very, very favorably by the Chamber of Commerce, by the business community. We've also given the smaller stores an additional year. So our ordinance would start January 1st, 2020, and any stores that are under 10,000 square feet would have an additional year to use up their current supply of paper and plastic bags, compliant or not. The larger stores will have until January 1st to use up their supply, and after that, they will be requested, under the ordinance, they will have to adhere to the paper bag standards, and they will not be able to offer any single-use plastic bags or any plastic bags that are under 12 mil in thickness. Okay, so that's all I have as far as my report. So I will take questions, and then I'm going to have, I'm going to have Frank, because some of your questions might pertain to him. So he's going to go through the ordinance versus ours versus Connecticut and also New York.
There are two handouts coming around. One that's stapled together, and then a single page. Well, if you've been following the news, New York State implemented a plastic bag ordinance last week, when the text of the regulations are buried within their budget document. So as soon as the budget was approved, this as well as congestion pricing in New York traffic and other matters, the way they do things. So now it's official. What you have is, in the stapled item, is the bill the 3 pages are the bill that is in before our legislature. We'll come back to that in a minute. And then behind that are 6 pages, which is an extract of the New York State budget document. We could read it, but I could also summarize it for you on a little sheet, which is strictly informal. It's based on my quick reading of it and my own notes. So it's not a legal analysis of it by any means, but it's just the high points. So you see on here, the New York State is effective on March 1st, 2020. There's a list of exempt bags, which includes what we're familiar about seeing, pharmacies and wrapping of uncooked food, garment bags, carry-out bags from restaurants for carry-out food. So they define that in the exemptions. And then they say prohibited are plastic carry-out bags that do not meet the above exemptions. They are applying a 5-cent fee on each paper carry-out bag. That fee is to be submitted to the state, the 5 cents per bag, and then the state refunds the municipality 40% or 5 cents charge. They get this municipalities get back a 2-cent charge, 2-cent refund.
Can you say that again? So it's 5 cents is submitted to the state.
Yes.
And then
by the municipality.
Okay.
And then it's handled through the tax system. The Department of Revenue Services will take in that money, and then in due process, like quarterly payments, they'll pay 40% of that back to the municipality.
And nothing to the merchant.
Correct.
But, so it approximates the California plan in the fact that it is a tax. It qualifies as a tax.
Yes. They refer to it as a fee. If we look at the legislature, they refer to it as a fee.
But
That's what I'm going to say. It's a fee. It's written here as a fee.
And
you want to call it a tax?
I think Justice Roberts calls it a tax. So let's not fool each other. It's a tax.
So that's why I provided, Jack, the actual text. for you to look at. Okay. The violations, there's a warning, and then there's a $250, and then after that, it's $500 per violation.
Is there any indication who's enforcing that?
Yes, the Department of Agriculture and Markets, and the Attorney General's office.
Again,
Now, it says here, and I'll give you the thing, it says the fee shall not constitute a sale subject to a tax. It will not, and it does not constitute a retail sale. So we've got to look more closely at that in our discussion of whether it's a tax or not.
you don't have to, that just defined it, that it is again, a tax. I mean, the issue and the thing that disappoints me the most is I am in favor of banning the bans, but I am in favor of the California model. California model is slightly different than what New York State passed, but could have relieved a lot of burden to most of the communities where we have different laws. The California model collects a fee. Part of it goes to the merchant, part of it goes to the state. Because states can tax for the general welfare of its population, including on environmental, it makes it clean. And in fact, in the state of Connecticut, I've been informing people as if this is new, but maybe I actually paint and people don't. There is a $2 environmental paint disposal fee on every can of paint you buy in the state. There's also a mattress fee, so it's consistent with that.
Jack, could I direct your attention to the handout, the New York Ordinance, page 3. The funny line numbering system at the top, at the very top of it, it's got 30, line number 37 in their document. There's item C, such a paper carry-out bag reduction fee shall not constitute a receipt for sale, and you can read it. Personal property subject to tax pursuant to article such and such. And the transfer of the bag to a customer by a person required to collect the tax shall not constitute a retail sale. So they're come to grips with this issue, and we just hope that the New York State Legislature has had adequate advice that it's legal.
Oh,
End of story.
if I
End of story?
No.
For New York. Whether it applies in Connecticut or not, we will see.
But you're making a legal statement that is categorically not correct.
Pardon me?
You're making a legal statement.
No, I'm just reporting what's in here.
Guys, neither one of us here is in position.
I don't hold
I've
my-
talked to town council, 25 years in the business, he's trying to figure it out. And there is no litigation, there's no law yet, and there's no interpretation been made by anybody yet to one of these things.
But-
It'll take some angry
Seth,
excuse.
don't confuse things.
All right, could we move along to the Connecticut?
Yes,
Two
please
things,
move
New York.
along.
We're not going to settle this tonight.
No, but we keep on giving you misinformation, and that's a disservice. So the fact is the reason why it says it's not a retail sale is that you cannot tax a tax. That is why the language was written that way. So New York can tax, that's one of the things that New York can do. They can tax
The
for the
state.
general welfare of the people. I highly doubt that it will be challenged. It's consistent with the California law. That's different than our law.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Oh, all right,
Thank you.
right.
So now we
Frank.
turn to the first 3 pages, which is a copy of bill number SB, Senate Bill 1003, which was passed out of the Environment Committee within the last 2 weeks. The vote on it was very lopsided. It was like 25 in favor and 5 opposed of this particular bill. There were about 20 bills presented to the Environment Committee in the free-for-all of submitting bills at the beginning of the legislative season. The Environment Committee winnowed it down, though they only forward out of committee one bill. And from conversation with the staff up there, they will not send another one. This is the bill that came out. That does not mean that the bill can't be is not expected to be amended on the Senate floor and then over in the House floor. So there are some surprising items not in this Bill 1003, and the anticipation is that those inclusions and omissions would be addressed on the floor of the Senate. We should also note that all of this is likely to happen in mid to late May, because on June 5th, the Legislature General Assembly comes to a hard stop by convention, by custom, by probably the Constitution. Any business that has not been conducted by June 5th expires. If we want to get a bill going for the next year, it's got to start back in the committee process again. So on the one-page unofficial handout with a couple of summary comments about the Connecticut bill, they have their exemptions, and you can see in the definitions of single-use carry-out bag, the normal pharmacy for prescription drugs, to protect items of meat and poultry when they're packaged with other packages, unwrapped food and plastic over articles of clothing on a hanger, and people are always quick to point out newspaper containers. This legislation defines a store as having gross annual sales of $2 million or over, and being over 10,000 square feet, or a convenience store that sells milk and bread and butter, or a convenience store that sells food to be consumed off of premises. The reusable bags that are discussed in here have to be over 12 mil. It does not have an environmental fee for paper, to the surprise of several people who were talking about the initial drafts of legislation. Violations follow the pattern of having a warning and then a fine of $250 for subsequent violation. That $250 fine can be enforced by the municipalities or departments of the Consumer Protection and DEEP. Of those fines that are collected by the municipality can keep 50% of it. It clearly states at the end of the legislation, end of the draft, that municipalities are not restricted in enacting more restrictive ordinances should it come to pass. This information can be compared to the top side of the handout that was prepared for last week's public hearing. But you might note, Monica says that we've had 2 public hearings. They've been different hearings, technically. Much of the testimony was the same, but the first one was on the concept, on the fact sheet, before there was any ordinance developed. And it was an opportunity for the public to make known their wish to proceed with the development of an ordinance. Last week's meeting, the handout as people came into the hearing, and also what was posted on the website and links from the website, brought you to a fact sheet that was above a draft ordinance. I think it's 5 pages long, 7, 8 pages long. The draft that was handed out is labeled as draft 2.4. Yes, there have been prior drafts, and then went through the different committees. Each committee had some suggestions which were incorporated and snowballed up into the current version of this as 2.4. Based on the language that is that New York has used and Connecticut state has used, I wouldn't be surprised to see a 2.5 at some point, because I think some of the craftsmanship that has come down from the state level in terms of the way certain terminology is used. I think we benefit from it, but we haven't changed it since our committees have reviewed it, and there may be an opportunity to improve the ordinance in a technical way. But you can see, as Monica summarized, that the charge is for 10 cents per bag, and that the merchant may keep that fee. It is a controversial topic, and one that we have seen discussed in the newspapers and seen discussed in our committees. People fervent on both sides of the issue as to whether the fee is appropriate. At this point, if we can't resolve this, it's a very good topic to go forward to the RTM and let the RTM vote on. Because both ways will be legal. One way may be subject to a legal challenge, at some point. But as far as the committees themselves reaching a Solomon-like decision on this, when the legal advice is problematic, it may be that the RTM will have to decide.
Okay, thank you. Mac, any?
No, I mean, just you
Okay.
guys you really don't have anything to add.
Just-
Thank you.
Well, I'd
Yep,
say
thank
public
you.
health and safety.
Yeah.
Public health and safety was the first committee to
Yeah.
meet on this back in
Yeah.
October. And it made very
I
valuable
mean-
contributions to.
I will say the majority of our members are against a 10-cent fee. I'll pick on Nina. Nina was very clear. She said this was supposed to be a ban on plastic bags. When did it become this bigger thing? And that's kind of been the tone of our committee.
So the next step is to come back with the real, whatever it's going to be,
Yeah,
so that we have something to put on the agenda. That's it.
we had
It is ours and it's yours. It's not anybody else's.
Seth,
Yes, yeah.
if we might have some time to questions before we.
Yeah,
go
no,
this
I-
today. First of all, I'm not sure it should be on our June agenda. And there's several reasons. I think there's been a tremendous amount in the newspaper of misinformation. I first want to say, I've been watching the three of your committees, and the three of you are doing an outstanding job. You should be applauded for the amount of work and effort that you are putting into this. So anything I have to say is not a challenge to any of the work that your committees has done. I really would like to applaud for what you have done. Some of this we actually had discussed briefly, but I think what Wayne is looking for is there should be a ruling from the Department of Revenue Services, which you were explaining, but that ruling would be helpful not only to us, but to all of the communities that currently have a 10 cents fee, that whether or not it's a taxable item or not. And the Department of Revenue Services, with this on its agenda, should be having that. It doesn't take long to get one of their rulings.
When?
What?
How soon? What would the turnaround be?
It matters what, they're not dummies, so they should be able to do it. I would estimate they should be able to do it within 30 to 60 days, because it's a 10-cent charge, but it's a matter of getting somebody asking them for it.
Well, there might be a ruling already that we just.
That's what I'm saying, so it may be.
Since there are so many other municipalities that.
Absolutely.
One would think.
But
I'm sure
it would be
yes.
good that we have that ruling, not because we need to, but because it's a courtesy to our merchants, because they're gonna have to implement
No, they've
systems.
asked, absolutely.
Yeah.
We will get that answer.
We actually discussed this at the last F&B meeting, and there's a number of attorneys on that committee. The volunteers enter into the agency principle. Because they are enacting business for the town, they are not a volunteer, they become an agent of the town. As an agent of the town, a first-year law student knows that the town is fully liable for anything that they may or may not do, not only at a store, but on the way to a store. So if they are driving and get into a car accident, the town can also be sued. That is one of the things that I have requested that Kate speak to our insurance, because it's different. We're all volunteers. If we get into an accident, that's our problem.
Jack, can I just interrupt and ask one question of you? I know we're not the leader in this particular ordinance. There are other towns or communities around us that have done this. And you're familiar, I'm sure, with what they're doing too. Are they looking at this as microscopically as
Yes.
we are?
Yes.
And in this case, since they've had a head start, has anyone challenged them at this particular point? Is anything in court or mulling around?
First of all, they haven't all
Here's where we
implemented.
stand. Here's where we
I'm
stand.
just,
Can I address
Okay,
it?
fine.
Jack brought it up last time. As a result of his bringing it up, Monica and I were at a meeting with First Selectman, Town Council, and Town Administrator. We brought up your concern. They unanimously said, to the effect, no problem, they're covered by liability. Now, we may need a memo to that effect. May
That's
have to
what-
go back
that's-
there. But trust me, we were in that meeting and it's what they
That
said.
they can tell
And then
me.
we said that because of your request,
Well,
and it's done.
but my committee has a responsibility to look at it, and no different than some of the other analysis I have gotten from both the town and the Board of Ed, simply because they say an analysis is done, is not necessarily sufficient for
Well,
the
that being
F&B
said,
committee.
Jack, what is
So
it,
they'll do
what is it that you want in this particular
Well,
issue?
they will meet with us and then
You
show
want a
us
memo?
what's in it.
Well,
No,
memo suffices.
we will do our responsibility as F&B and look at this ordinance from the course, which we could not do until the ordinance was completed.
There you go. You have
It's
it.
as simple. I have it, we'll look at it.
Okay, so you'll let us know what you
Yeah,
find.
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
guarantee that most of the course associated, because Kate and I have had a long conversation with this, are going to be
So we're leaving
minor.
this that your committee is looking into this
Yes,
by a date certain?
but by the time we need to.
No, but I don't want it on the floor of the RTM that night to come up. We need to
Keep
get
you
it
informed.
before the next rules committee meeting.
I can't guarantee that.
Well,
Well, that's what we're trying to
then
do.
I-
We
then-
will
then
try
in the
and-
interim, I think it would be
Folks,
appropriate. for
I'm
us to
sorry,
have a
I'm
memo
allowed
to that.
to, a committee is allowed to report on any action, and we will address it. So, we will invite Kate, we will talk about it. I anticipate that the expenses are going to be minimal, but at least we will do a financial review. We will have it in time to make a report, if it's going in June, to the June meeting. That's the date certain that we have to. I'm
Well,
sure we're
well,
not
I
gonna
don't-
try to do it.
I would
You
say
know
this,
that we want to
folks.
avoid
Folks,
this
I'm not
particular
looking to fight on the
One moment,
RTM
everybody,
floor,
stop.
but I'm
Right
allowed
now.
to do the
Jack,
job of
Jack,
my
Jack,
committee.
Jack, please, stop. Rules Committee is entitled and should have the final deal that's going on the floor of the RTM. Okay? I don't know when that is. I never said when it was. I just said, when it gets here, that's what it is. Hopefully, it's got this stuff worked out. It may not. It may be that we go with something and we know going in that there are going to be people offering amendments on the floor. But those of us who've been around doing this a while also know what midnight and 1, 2 in the morning is about when we start doing that. So the ideal thing is to try and get this worked out. Yeah. Gary.
maybe I missed it. Did I get my question answered?
Yeah.
In respect to that there
He
are
was
other
done.
towns that have done this and they're ahead of us in this process. Westport being an example.
They did.
Now, has Westport been challenged in court? Or has any of these others been challenged in court that have imposed a fee?
Gary, they haven't
What's that?
because
All
the
right.
ordinances are just kicking in now that have
Right.
the fees associated. Westport did a bag ban in 08, but they never had a charge associated. And the charge is the item that could be.
Yeah, and so in other words, you're telling me that any charge as a bag fee has not necessarily been in effect in any of our surrounding communities up until tomorrow, as an example.
I
Essentially,
think
yes.
that the first one that has a fee associated will kick in June.
Okay, I just want to know, because we're talking about this, I'm going, we're not the leader of the pack. We could be precedent setting, but I'm wondering what everyone else did, and it's sometimes not a bad idea to see what your neighbor's doing.
Yeah.
And if indeed your neighbor hasn't had the fee kick in yet, well, that's one reason why we're looking at it. Fine, okay.
In full disclosure, the other ordinance, there's an ordinance that has passed up, and I don't know the effective date of New Canaan's. And then there are other communities, Weston. Now, the agencies within those towns have, the management of those towns has charged city employees with being an enforcement officer, a DA, an environment control officer, a conservation officer, or this or that. What we have been operating under the request, not that no town charges, save for liability, may be incurred. And so we've been faithful to that. When we drafted on the yellow sheets, then the definitions of the environmental compliance officer, this terminology that you will see here allows the Board of Selectmen to appoint a volunteer or a town employee, should they choose.
I read that.
And so there we are. I just want to make sure that
No, maybe I was the only one who missed the idea that this has not been enforced in every town. I just assumed, and maybe I missed the meeting, that they said that. That it's in there, and I thought they had already applied that, but I stand corrected, they have not.
this phrase was crafted and prepared by town attorney to allow the selectmen to appoint a volunteer, should they choose to.
Gary,
Alright.
Gary, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
I misspoke. Stanford's ordinance has a 10 cents charge in it. That became effective April 1st.
On today, okay. Yeah.
Yes, and Weston's became effective, I believe, March 1st, and they had a very short effective date. So, and I believe theirs was March 1st, and they had a 10 cents charge.
No, I just thought that if it had been, say, a year ago, because Westport's
Right.
rule has been around for a while, I just thought there may be some rumblings of some judicial action that we may go, maybe there's something to it. But it's too new, so we don't have any precedence to look
And
at.
that's part of the concern. Part of what I did is in a conversation with Wayne, because this is up, is ask for a legislative act, which is ask for an expedited judicial decision from our courts. It's a frequent thing done in legislatures where they go to the court and say, rule on this. And since there were a number of towns with 10-cent fees, and the question is, since towns are not collecting the money, it's not a tax. But the question is whether or not the 10 cent is imposing into the marketplace a will of government for which it has no business. It is different if you do something like you require the use of seatbelts or require helmets. This is a fee. So that's the legal question that everybody is wrestling with. And, back in November when I met with the BYO folks, they gave me Stanford's legal opinion. Frank and I discussed that, and, Stanford doesn't look as if they really, if you read it, and I've given it to several lawyers, and virtually everyone says the council is saying don't charge the fee. It's challengeable. Even though we don't know what the outcome would be, it's a challengeable item. Wayne has come out with the same. Norwalk, from what I understand, did not speak to their town council. So I don't know who's spoken to town council and if there's anyone with any constitutional knowledge that had done it. And by the way, just to give a little background, Kathy Emmett's a highly respected attorney in the state. Her husband's a highly respected attorney, actually represented the Democrats in the federal case about using SEE funds. Wayne's organization has put about 10 different town councils out that are around the state. He's highly respected, and he's a former elected state, I forget if he was a senator or
State
a
rep.
State representative.
representative, highly respected. So it's not as if he's just shooting from his hip. In the most recent newspaper article that I read, not to respond to anybody individually, but the fact that people believe that they're going to sue Stanford and not Darien because they're a bigger city is a foolish concept.
Class action.
What they'll do is they'll pull us all in together. And in fact,
Class action suit.
and in fact, when I asked for an expedited review, the response was, it will cost money because everybody has to put their dockets together, the businesses doing that. But I anticipate down the road that that would happen. I was truly hoping that our state, I'm in favor of banning the bags, 100%. I was truly hoping that our state would do something similar to California, or even if they took the governor's proposal where there was a tax, that would have cleaned it all up for all of us. Unfortunately, Hartford, once again, just stirred the pot and didn't answer. And the biggest concern, and Frank, you can answer this, but from my knowledge of challenging laws, which I have done, the fact that it says that towns can have stricter, unless we go into the minutes of the meetings and understand what the intent of that is, we don't know if that means that we can have thicker mill rates, or whether or not they were giving the towns the power to charge a 10-cent charge. We don't know until we see those minutes, which are not available at this time. And that's frightening also for all of our towns. So it's a
So your
dilemma.
point is, you know, we
It's
got
a real
work to
dilemma
do.
Yeah,
We got work to
and I'd like to see what comes out at the state, because if the state does what they should do properly, which is charge a tax, give some to the merchant, give some to the state, there is no reason for our ordinance, because I believe when I'm looking, and you guys can correct me, but when I look at what we had versus what the state had, it was pretty close if it wasn't exact.
It's very close, okay.
Yeah,
The Connecticut
so-
does not include a fee going to anyone.
Right, but I'm
That's
saying,
New York.
if they deal with that, then there may be no need for our ordinance, because we would be,
Okay, well,
in
unless that is brought in
Let the
later
record
on.
show
But that's
that
not-
you and I do agree with each other.
Yeah.
On something.
we agreed on that.
That's all the thing.
Yeah.
Jack,
Listen, what
we're, may happen.
folks, this is what's called searching for the truth, right? We're trying to find the right way to do it. And that's why we have great debate. And we got a lot of people doing heavy-duty homework.
And they've done a great job.
Mike,
Mark,
one second, let me, Mike's.
could you give a flavor of the 7 interviews that you had with the Darien merchants about their view on their option to charge 10 cents versus the obligation of charging a 10-cent? What was the sense of the 7 focus groups?
They were pretty adamantly opposed to it. and
Opposed to?
Opposed to being required
They
to
were opposed to
charge
being
the
required.
10 cents.
Because I thought I remembered last month saying that they wanted it to take the burden off their shoulders.
No, that's a concept, which is, you know,
But that's not what they said.
no, that's not what they're saying. They're saying that their customers don't want it. The sports shop doesn't want it.
Is it the smaller versus, are you seeing a difference between smaller and larger? Want versus not want? Like Palmer's wanted it.
Yes, Palmer's wants it
Okay.
because they want to recoup some of the cost of the bag. The plastic bag costs about $0.0125. You can get a recycled bag that will meet the criteria for, I found a source for 5 cents. So there is a cost difference. But if you think big picture and half the people no longer need a bag, then you obviously brought your cost per bag down significantly because you're not giving it out to as many people. So the smaller stores don't want it because their customers don't want it. And the sports shop is a larger store that fits into that 10,000 and over, and they are interested in being green, so the other component of this is being required to meet the paper standards as far as recyclable and post-consumer recyclable content. They're for that, even though that would require them, you know, a significant, that'll be a significant charge. They will not have as long to use up their bags. Their bags cost about $1 a piece, and they will not be able to use up all those bags by January 1st. But what they're really not in favor of is the 10 cents, and that is not because they're cheap, that is because it doesn't fit into their service ethic. They don't charge for alterations, they don't charge to send something home for you, they don't charge for gift wrapping, so that's their point. But I can't stress how accommodative they have been with the other parts of the ordinance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, at the public hearing, the woman from Palmer's talked about how they were in favor of it, but I don't remember if they were in favor of it contingent on, would their point of view change if the 10% cents charge went away? Would their endorsement of it change?
Yes.
It would?
Yes.
They would be against it
Yes.
if there was not the 10-cent charge?
They have been actually in the paper saying that they would oppose the ordinance if there wasn't the 10 cents. So right now, they will recapture that 10 cents along with all of their competitors. So their thinking is if it's not mandatory, larger stores won't require this charge, and they will be at a disadvantage because it'll cost them more.
But if it's not mandatory, they could charge it if
They could.
They
Yeah.
could.
But their
So-
feeling is that if they charge it and whatever other store, I'm not going to say names anymore, but what other big stores out there don't charge it, it could be construed as a disadvantage
They
to
want a
them.
fair net for that.
And the other thing I heard is you're going to steal language and look at other language from things that are passed, but I think a lot of the enforcement is problematic in terms of, I sent the question of defining what is a violation, and if 10 other people come in, is that 10 violations? But clearly defining what a violation is, what the 7-day period is
Yeah.
after they've been violated it, or
You know, we've had various discussions with that in committee, and I think if you read this, it's clear, but I agree that even we who've been looking at this a number of times, we're like, wait, what does this mean? And so we'll tighten that up for you so that it's a little clearer. And I want to just say again, to Wayne, that, just let me finish a second, Jack, that the state idea, he feels that the state will not do this, I forget what you call it. What do you call it? You know what I'm talking about. No, the motion.
The expedited judicial decision.
Right, I asked him about that, and he said that the state won't do that because they don't rule on theoretical, they only rule on real, okay? And I spoke with Wayne about 5 minutes before I came in, and again, just in my conversation with him, he, again, is expressing his concerns. He feels obligated to express those concerns. He's not anti, he's not anti the ordinance by any means. He said there has been no Connecticut case on this issue that's been brought forth. So he can't point to a case and say, this is why I feel this way. So it is his opinion that we have to go with.
Well, the coverage of this has been very good and very accurate in most cases. There was one slip up last week sometime where it was alleged that Wayne said the ordinance is illegal.
That
And that
was-
set up a
yes.
whole lot of flares.
Right, that
And so
got my eye.
And it was
tracked that
taken-
back, and
That's
and
not
of course
what Wayne said.
He
Right.
did not say that. He's raising.
Knowing Wayne.
concerns.
No,
But he was, somebody misquoted him.
and we should add, Wayne is also, and his company is town council for Greenwich.
Right.
And Greenwich originally did have the 10-cent charge in it. And while I don't know the details, and I'm sure you know more so, they did remove it. I know Wayne expressed the same thing. Again, it's only a question, since towns can't tax other than personal property, if we could tax, this would have been easy. We can't.
The Greenwich thing started at an odd number.
Yeah.
That charge was 23 cents.
Yeah.
And I went through all the committees and went to the floor of the RTM and watched the tape.
Did you? Okay.
Thank you, 79, right? And they amended it on the floor of the RTM that night to 10 cents. Then the discussion started again, and they knocked out the whole way they accomplished it was they just took the paragraph and just struck paragraph 7 or whatever it was.
On the floor?
On the floor.
So it was never
they went
done
in that
later, it was
evening.
all done on the floor.
They went to-
That's the clarifying point.
Yes.
that
They
was
went to
not
the
clear
floor.
last time we
Wait.
had this meeting.
They went to the floor of 23 cents.
Okay,
The amendment brought it down to 10.
okay.
And the next amendment
Got it.
knocked paragraph such and such out, leaving you with an ordinance which is banning the plastic bags, which is in effect right now.
Yeah, and as I'm mentioning again, the difficulty has been that there is no legal opinion that at least I'm aware of where a town attorney has said that the 10-cent charge is not challengeable and can substantiate it under Connecticut law, and that's the problem. It's really challengeable not under Connecticut, but under federal law. And that's where this case will be heard, not in the state. It's a federal issue, in a state law.
Happy days. Lois,
I have just a quick question. It looks like the state is saying it's $250 for the fee for the first, after a warning, and our thing says $150, so what happens in that case?
It's a,
Do we have to follow the state?
a technical term, jump ball, what we're going to put in there. You know, after we look at what other people do, maybe we could simplify it and just make it $250.
That's a good question, though. So what you're saying is because we're not as strict.
Right.
Okay. Yes, I think that I think our first would have
So
to
when,
match.
when is the session, the state
Yes.
session ends?
June 5th.
Okay, so that's before it would come to our RTM, so we could have that, if they pass it. And if they don't pass it, then whatever we do, we'll have to look at in terms of whatever the state passes the following year.
No, it is.
One of
The
the
point-
nice modifications that is in this particular draft, it says after you have a warning, you have 60 days before you can go back and get a violation. So in other words, rather than having the enforcement officers stand on the sidewalk and, you know, keep writing citations, you have a certain amount of humane nature. If they're not compliant, let them order their bags and give them 60 days to do it.
all right, nice job, guys. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Jack,
Thank
you're in and you're up to your neck and you're going full bore, nice going. It's
Well, I've
that's-
had very good conversations with Monica and Frank and I talked about this early. From the BYO folks sent me which is part of the reason why I was a little gobsmacked in some of the most recent articles, because Frank and I had Stanford's opinion back in November. So, you know, and it was pretty clear what Stanford's attorney, and in fact, Frank and I in an earlier, I guess, rules meeting talked about the importance that Stanford has a severability clause in there, which is basic, many ordinances have it, but it's basically put in there, if you believe one part of your ordinance is struck down as illegal, it doesn't make the rest of it illegal. So you don't put it in every one of them. I mean, we put in teachers' contracts and that, but we don't put it in every one of our ordinances. And it's in that one. And so that's sort of telling them that they sort of expect down the road some challenge to this.
Monica,
Can I ask if anyone else has any questions other than this? I think we've talked this one pretty thoroughly. Does anyone else have any questions? Because what we really want to do is we are still planning on bringing this to you for the next rules meeting and having all these questions answered to the best of our ability. But if you don't give us the questions, we can't answer them. And I don't want to wait and try to get this stuff done when we don't have enough time.
So we have two, the ruling by the Department of Revenue Services and the ruling on the use of the volunteer in public service.
And Lois, I have
Lois?
yours.
And I didn't phrase that like mine.
Yeah.
We know what we're talking about.
I have yours to
I've actually
clarify,
spoken to Kate.
and I have yours,
And
Lois.
I have another
we're on the
question.
same way.
So I know throughout this discussion, there was a question on the thickness of the plastic bags. And the state looks like they're talking about 12 mil also. So has that question gone away, or is it still a question?
No, we've decided, and the fact that the state is going to 12 is kind of interesting. But Greenwich is 12. Stanford did bump it to 12.
Oh, okay.
But Connecticut will be the only state that's above all other states actually are 2.25 to 4, and we'll be 12. That will be.
But there's support among the other towns. 12 is starting to become a number, and the state
12.
is starting 12.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and it's we can't we don't have a unanimous vote on that in our committees, but we have a majority, and so we need to keep moving forward. So we're sticking
No, I don't
with the
disagree. I
12.
just was wondering if we were going to be the only ones saying 12, and then I was surprised that the state was saying 12, and now you're saying Greenwich says 12, so that more fits.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay,
Well, can I just ask you what?
Yeah.
So
okay.
the smaller stores, there are a few smaller stores that are already reusing recyclable bags, and they believe that they have the right mill. Is there someone who will be going out and like double checking that before the ordinance starts, so everybody's on the same page, so they're not surprised?
I asked the BYO people if they would be interested. I think that after the ordinance is passed in whatever form it is, there'll be requirements that stores will have to meet, and so I've asked them if they, to not fade out on us here, that, once this is passed, and to be part of that outreach.
Okay.
And they have done a fantastic job in the past with different groups that they've reached out to. They've, the children, they've been at the sidewalk sales, they've, gone to the senior center, etc. So I'm hoping that they will be supportive of, no matter how the ordinance is written and however it is voted on, to be supportive of the town and help the merchants. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I guess I was in a store today, specifically asked them. I went into the store because it was a smaller store. They were using paper bags, and I said, "How do you feel about this?" And they said, "We're compliant. We're already compliant. It's recyclable." So I think that's wonderful, and I trust that that's the case. And but I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be an expert.
Right.
So
okay. So
and if they think they're fine,
Yeah.
and it's not, I'm almost asking prior to that, is somebody like swinging back to them prior to that to just say,
we will have to have some sort of outreach, because Mike asked me, and what we found when we went out and visited the stores is that they actually didn't. They were, I think, thinking like a lot of people were, that this was a ban on plastic
Right.
bags, and the whole paper bag compliance, it's not just that it's recyclable. A lot of ordinances it has to be recyclable, but ours has another component of that, in that it has to be made of 40% post-consumer material, and that is an additional hurdle that I shouldn't say hurdle, that's the wrong word, but it's another requirement or another goal, right? And so
Makes the bags more expensive.
yes, and so that will require probably sourcing. Hopefully their company has that option. If not, they'll have to source somewhere else. But yes, a lot of stores thought that they were good to go, and it turns out that there are other aspects of the ordinance that they'll have to adhere to that they didn't know. So the outreach there, I'm just, honestly, I'm just focused on getting this to the RTM, but in the back of my head, I've already started thinking that next step is really important.
yeah, and maybe just helping them. Hey, these other stores have found this source that's doing it. Have you contacted them?
I found a source,
Yeah.
but Jamie told me I can't say the name, so
Right.
I can't say the name.
Maybe the Chamber of Commerce can do that, though. I
Yeah.
mean, that would seem
Yeah.
appropriate.
Yeah.
Susan Cater at the Chamber of Commerce has been really, really helpful, and she's,
And she turned around, right? In the first meeting, public hearing, she was not for it, but at the public hearing last week, she supported it.
She voiced some, some concerns that everybody has had, but I think that the movement more towards the middle and trying to reach a compromise that will work for both the business community and the individuals in town, the citizens in town, making it, you know, as flexible as possible for the business, but yet still adhering to the spirit of the ordinance, which is to have people bring their own bags and to end the use of single-use plastic bags.
If I might, one of the things that I really applaud the committee on is you've been upfront, whether or not it has, you know, you can tell somebody something 10 times and they still don't hear it.
What?
But you can, but the fact is that it's been a consistent message on the type of paper bag that we were supposed to, as well as the mill. And it avoided really what Stanford did, which was catastrophic, because they passed the ordinance. People went out and bought bags to comply with what the ordinance was, and then they upped it on the stores.
You mean merchants went out and bought?
Yeah, and then they upped it, they upped the mill on it, and left merchants with, many of them that I've heard of, having friends in Stanford and the city reps, with merchants just going, but we bought to comply, and now you're telling us we're out of compliance.
That's what we're giving them, a longer
So
period of
you-
time.
And you've done a very good job in doing the
Yeah.
best that you can to do it, and so I applaud you on that.
Thanks. And Patty, to your question, by giving them the additional year, so it's January of 2021, so we will have enough time to get the message out, and they will have enough time to reorder, hopefully. the
My
compliant.
instinct, just when I went around and spent some time asking specific merchants, big and small, was I was particularly concerned about the smaller merchants, I think, right? Everybody, but particularly the smaller merchants, because how long would it take them to go through their whole inventory? And that extra year was like a tipping point in a positive way for
Right.
them.
And that's
that
what
was
the
feedback
Chamber of
that I heard.
Commerce felt.
Okay.
So does anyone else have any questions that you would like us to answer before the next rules meeting?
You're gonna come back to us, right?
I don't know if no,
Okay.
yes. Yes. We will be back. So you have those first two
Lovely.
you said, right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Nice job.
Nice job, you guys.
Yes, please,
Yeah. Shooter training is the next, that's tomorrow night at 6 at the police station for RTM members. We've got a group of people who are going to go to that. Then Jack and I had fun. I got a call from Wayne's office after I published the agenda, right? Saying, hey, I have these resolutions ready for you. We're going to send them right over. What? And so with your permission, we'll add this on. This is a project the Finance and Budget Committee has been working on, and it's come to fruition here to just clean up some of the places where we have excess funds lying.
Well, there are a lot of additional reserves, and we've been working with the Director of Finance, and it started out with the conversation that John Zabrowski and I had. There's been some changes in policy. The fund balances are now being reviewed by the Board of Finance on at least a quarterly basis. The fund balances will be included in the budget, and they are to be reviewed by the Board of Selectmen during the balancing. A lot of our funds are operating funds, so they exist. I mean, the biggest one that we talk about is when we do a transfer to capital. That's a fund. There's separate monies in there. If you hire a police officer to be outside, for any of the utilities or for the schools or anybody who does an event, Boy Scouts or anything like that, we actually process the payroll. It's paid into the town, and we make sure that the police officers are reimbursed. That's an operating fund. Because Board of Eds are not allowed to carry balances, and we get certain special ed funding that covers more than 1 year, that has to stay in a fund because the school cannot, in the state of Connecticut, maintain a reserve. So there's many funds that are actually operating. There were probably about 9 funds that we found that were no longer operating, or due to changes in management, the existing management did not have knowledge. So there were 3 funds in Park and Rec. I'm happy to say that one of them will be supplementing the development of the Cherry Lawn Playground this year for about $35,000, saving, not basketball, specific to the playground is what it was given for. And so it's being used for that. And there was
How much was that, Jack?
about 30 something. And it's part of a project that they've been looking to do. So that is already transferred into the fixed asset and reducing our taxes this year. There was another, I think, 4,000 to 8,000 on Wheat Beach that's going to be used. There was approximately 9,000 for cemetery, the town cemetery maintenance that's going to be used. And there's a couple other little small ones. In addition, there are 4 funds that approximate between $400,000 to $500,000 that are being returned to the general fund. The only real difference of this is that when you're looking at our rating, not that we could go any higher because we're AAA and they don't give quadruple A's, but it does help our funding. There are 3 funds that are no longer in use. It was explained in the ordinance. And those will require Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM approval because they were added as part of the budget, and hence all 3 of those organizations need to approve it. There's another fund, for those of us who've been around when Superstorm Sandy existed, we did a transfer over of funds that was properly accounted for because all the expenses and the receipts and everything of the damage was put into a separate reserve fund, which is the right way to account for it. We funded it because we thought it was crossing over a fiscal year. In the future, we would not do that funding because these funds can have negative balances. So in the future, we'd still account for everything in a reserve fund, we just wouldn't fund it. And so it's about $215,000, which was appropriated by the Board of Finance and the RTM, which is being returned to the general fund. So we're taking them from assigned to unassigned, which makes the town look even better when we're doing the analysis by the bonding agencies. So it took about 6 months worth of work, and we're now working on a couple of other things. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned is how F&B has been working. We have, if you really think about it, the town is a $30 million corporation. And essentially in our finance department, we have 4 people. So one of them is handling payroll, one of them is handling accounts payable, and then we have an assistant director and a director of finance. So when you start to look to expand out, there isn't really a lot of bodies to really go and do it. And so F&B is working with the first selectman. We actually will work with the Board of Ed on occasion, with the Board of Finance, and we become the resource for them to do some additional analytics. And that's how this project came along, and it's good for the town. So, as I said, we're returning money back, and some of it's going for really good use. I know that Pam was very happy that she could go and do
Great.
that playground.
Absolutely. Toddler playground.
Yeah, yeah, which was well needed.
Yeah.
It's about 10 years plus old.
So,
That ain't happened yet.
do we want to put these, Jack, on the,
This will be put on from the request of the Board of Finance, because they're first going through budgets over the next couple of days,
Huh.
and it's not going to get on the list. We would like this to be on the May agenda because it fits into our other budget resolutions that we'll do.
That makes sense.
okay, so we just sort of formally do what you've already done, which is assign it to you
Yeah.
for May, and
Right. But I wanted to bring everybody up to date on where it is, and we wanted to at least have the ordinances in hand so we could move forward with it.
okay, all in favor?
Somebody
Okay,
make
yeah.
somebody make a motion? Go ahead.
Well, yes, well.
I'll make a motion.
Lois is
I'll
up.
second it. We'll make it formal.
I'd already written unanimous, I just hadn't written I'd already written that part.
Okay, so in setting the agenda for April 22nd, it's the police union contract, and that's it. So can I have a motion for, set the agenda for,
Are we gonna ask, it's the police, can we also do the blight? I mean, if somebody wants to volunteer, why not?
I could
Do it at
put
that
that on
meeting.
if we,
Have somebody.
I mean, I could just
We can
say
ask.
without objection. All right, you want to put a,
I just assumed that's how we did it the last time.
All right. All right. So, right now, I'm the one, the one who's looking for the candidates, so the blight, who would we want to assign that to?
I don't think it's an assignment, it's just.
Just, let's
You
find
ask
them, okay.
that, you know, as I said, if you send an email out, we're looking for a blight, if, you know.
Put it in the
yeah.
newspaper?
It's out.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
as opposed to
I'll work with
district
Don on
chairs,
that
I'm
tomorrow.
saying send it to
Fine.
all of the reps.
Yep, do it. Okay, so a motion to make, so it's the police contract and the blight.
Yep.
Can I have a motion? Okay. Second? All in favor? Great. Terrific. Other business? I'll take a motion to adjourn. Lois just so moved. I've got Adele for a second. All in favor?
Rising vote.
That's a rising vote.